Good morning.
Good morning. This
Welcome.
is December 8th. It is the second Sunday of Advent before the coming of Jesus, is what Advent means, before the coming. And our topic today is as above, so below. And Bob chose the topic, as above, so below. And it has many interpretations and many meanings, but I did a
Sure.
research paper on it when I first became a minister. And at that time, we had to do a paper. And I did it on Hermes Trismagistus, who supposedly wrote, let's see, what did he wrote? He wrote something. that, and he's the one that's attributed in that book to talking about as above, so below. Now, who was Hermes Trismegistus? It just means thrice great, three times great.
Oh,
And he was a combination of we think, it's so ancient, nobody really knows for sure, but combination of the Greek god Hermes and an Egyptian god. So Thros, who's the one who taught language, how to write. And so, but it has influenced even many of our Christian beliefs, and especially not thinking of the word now. Oh, the Gnostic beliefs, because the part that they adopted is that with purification of self and soul, that then the soul returns to God, to heaven at the end. But
as above.
well, yes, as as above, so below is his statement, and that has many meanings. One of the meanings that the book that I read emphasizes that it is the same in some ways in heaven or in spirit as it is in physicality. And one of those things is cause and effect. So as you think, so is your life. So as you think, so will be your life. But also, um, who you are in consciousness attracts your experiences. And so that is what Bob was attracted to with with our teaching, which, by the way, is which our teaching is that as you think and believe, so do you attract circumstances to you. And I quoted last week, but I'm going to do it again, Albert Einstein's quote, because I've never seen this from him. He says, everything is energy. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. So he's talking about the energy that you put out is a vibration, and it attracts to you a like vibration.
In psychology, we refer to much of how we see the world as a projection. And that what we do is we have a set of beliefs and we operate within the framework of those beliefs. And so we project out a view of the world without realizing that it's a projection. We think that we're actually seeing the world the way it is. We're actually seeing the world through the filters of our idea of the world. And so, and how that works with attraction is that if your idea of the world is it's not safe, then you anticipate and look for a lack of safety. And vibrationally, what that represents is that you begin to connect to all of those energies and all of those people who also share that belief and that idea, or they give you feedback that represents that. I can remember a long time ago in my youth, and I was dating this young girl, and I told her how beautiful she was, and she said, "Oh, don't say that. It's not true." And I said, "No, but you really no, that's not true." And I would find many different ways to tell her that I thought she was very beautiful, and she would find many ways to tell me that it wasn't true. So I stopped telling her. And then she said, "You don't think I'm very pretty, do you?" I said, "Why?" She said, "You never say it." So what she did was her view, which was projected that she was ugly, was then represented in her atmosphere. And my response eventually was, I'm not going to continue to say something that you're not going to like, so I will support your projection. And then she was able to go back and say, see, I told you I was ugly. But we do that all the time. We do that. I hear that a lot of times in relationships where people say, I can't trust people, which is more than I can't trust people, I won't trust people. And since I won't trust people, people will relate to me in a way in which they know they're not trusted. And if they're not trusted, then what happens is they eventually act in a way that isn't very trustworthy because it's not important. It isn't valued, it isn't seen. And so I want to move into a little bit deeper level of it and talk about the DNA of consciousness. And our thoughts have their own DNA and they match and they work with the universe that matches that DNA.
A metaphorical DNA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it starts to become a really powerful thing when you start seeing that the way you enter every relationship, the way you enter every morning, the way you enter every moment has its own script, if you will, and it's unseen and unknown by you because it's a projection. And so I wake up on a Saturday morning. Oh, wow, it's Saturday morning. Well, how is that different than Monday morning? Well, I have to go to work. So my projection of I have to go to work may keep me from seeing the trees or listening to the birds or appreciating, which is one of the reasons I changed I have to go to work or I got to go to work to I get to go to work. Because when I changed my projection that it was no longer something I had to do, but rather a privilege I got to do, then my view of it changed. So our words about our moment-to-moment experience, our view of the universe from a moment-to-moment experience is constantly out there attracting those things that are like itself. Have you ever noticed somebody who cannot help but connect with a person who is extremely needy? And eventually their objection to this neediness causes them to say, I can't have this relationship anymore. But what's not spoken is that very often the person who is needy needs somebody who is also just as needy and needs to have a person in their life that has a lot of needs. And so what ends up happening is the courtship is, I love that I'm needed by you. I love that you need me so much that you can't live without me. And then a
Because
little
then
way,
I feel safe.
right, exactly. And then down the road is, what have you done for me lately? Because it's not getting any better. And then the person who doesn't want to be needed like that anymore starts saying, well, I have needs too. No, you don't. Your need is to need to take care of me. What you see is the projection eventually it begins to unravel. And as it unravels, then usually what happens is we don't look at the projection. We simply say next, or I want to move on, or that didn't work.
That didn't work. Let
Yeah.
me find it.
And so what I see is we have serial failures, and those serial failures have to do with our failure to look at what is it I'm projecting that keeps bringing to me the conditions that I'm in. And we don't like to do that because we don't like to think that we're responsible for the conditions that we're actually living in. And we are.
And we are. So we always say, look for a pattern. As
Mm.
do you have a pattern that's repeated? Because then that's on you. There's something in your consciousness, meaning something in your thinking, your belief system. And of course, that always has to do with the way you were raised and how you grew up and what you learned to expect for you. But we can change those patterns.
And
when
if we change those
recognize them.
patterns, we change the world that we live in. We change everything.
But it starts with changing your beliefs.
Exactly.
Because as above, so below. In other words, in this case, as you're thinking, so do you create your life.
Judith and I had the privilege over the years of being in ministry to teach ministers and try to help them become better ministers. And one of my tasks was to watch a minister walk on the stage and then begin to do their presentation. And the thing that I noticed was there were ministers who walked onto the stage who didn't believe it was their stage. And the obstacles they had to overcome was that whatever they were saying was heard by the people listening as, this isn't real. This isn't what you really believe. You don't really have any ownership of this. And so when you begin to own the world you live in, you begin to own the stage that you're walking on. What happens is there's a congruence and an excitement that you're present that has other people want to join you. And so when you walk into the day of your life that you're in right now, saying, I'm not sure that I want it, I'm not sure that it's really mine, I'm not sure I really belong here, that gets communicated at the universal level, at the consciousness level. And what ends up happening is you begin to collect evidence that you don't really fit, belong, or it's not really your world. Well, why would it be your world if you already declared that it wasn't? You're getting exact. But what happens is you blame the people that won't let you into their world when it's you who won't enter your own world. And so I would ask you to
Or
do
look
that.
at it. Yeah.
Look at that spiritually. How many of you have closed your eyes and meditated and say, this doesn't really work. I wish I were good at it. I don't know how to do this. And what happens is you've disowned your own connection and then you're waiting for it to be overcome, as if somehow the magic of the moment will take over. Now, sometimes the magic of the moment can intrude to the point that it gets your attention. It has you actually say, hey, wait, maybe I'm holding me back. Maybe spirit's not holding me back. Maybe consciousness is holding me back. Maybe it's my decision to not join that has me feeling like a stranger.
Right. And sometimes you cannot see the relationship. If you have an accident like I've had and others I know have, you can't look at that and say, now, why did I have that accident? Or why did I have that injury? And some of those questions we just can't answer. But it's best not to then make the teaching wrong, but see if maybe in time you can see. Sometimes I look for the seed of equivalent benefit. What did this hardship do for me? And I can always find something.
You bring
So,
up a very, very critical point, which is if you can, stay in the inquiry, not in the
yes,
judgment.
yes.
Inquire into what's been happening to you as a curious bystander and as a curious participant, and look at it and say, wow, I wonder what does this have to, and then be open to more and more and more. I remember, and I'm sure you had this happen too, the professors at the university saying things like, this is what we know so far.
Mhm.
They didn't say this is what we know
We've got it
forever
all
and ever.
figured
Yeah,
out.
exactly. And the more everybody had it all figured out, the less future figuring was going to go on and the less enlightenment was going to be possible because you live in the figuring it out, having figured it out rather than in the inquiry.
Yes, I love that. Is his name Neil Tyson, the
Yeah,
astronomer?
yeah.
He's put out a book that is an upgrade of a book that he wrote 35 years ago, explaining astronomy to children who wrote questions in a magazine. And here he is updating it 35 years later because the knowledge base has increased so much. Since 35 years, he had to update the book. And we have to too, with our understanding. We can't just base it on what we've always believed or always thought was true. But some of these old sayings, the wisdom, as above, so below, as with our thinking, so is our life. We can certainly see it. We've seen it as therapists working with people. We can just look at their life and guess at their belief systems and then explore that with them until they can see it and hopefully change it.
Mhm.
It is always within our power to change our beliefs and therefore change our lives. You can think that you're a victim, a forever victim, and there's nothing you can do to change it. Or you can decide, I don't want to stay a victim. So, how can I uh, do differently, think differently, and become a different person with a different life? And so many people have had, multiple lives in their lifetime these days that we know you can do that.
Mhm.
The first thing is checking in and listening to your beliefs and your thoughts. Catch yourself thinking a negative thought or expecting less than good and say, wow, look at that. I think I need to change that thought and use an affirmation. That's why we have these tools of affirmations. An affirmation is a positive statement in the present tense stating you have what you want. And so an affirmation be I think positively. I know what I want and I state it in the present tense that I have it. So affirmations are a very positive way to change
Right.
negative thinking or expectations.
I had a friend many years ago who told me that he was afraid of dogs. And I said, Laura, you're afraid of dogs? He said, because they bite. They're vicious. And I said, how is that true? He says, I've been bitten 3 times and by different breeds of dogs. So we happened to be out and on a walk and a dog was present. And I said, how would you greet the dog? And he showed me. He said, I would go like that to the dog to pet him. And he would automatically snarl at me and snap at me. And I said, okay, let's try this. So he walked over to the dog and he put his hand up and the dog stepped back. And I said, let's try it a different way. Put your hand under, below, not above, but below. And he put his hand below and the dog sniffed his hand and licked his hand. And he said, this is amazing. I have spent my whole life being afraid of dogs. And all I needed to do was to change my hand from up here to down here. But I didn't know that I could challenge that. I didn't know that I could have a different experience. Not only that, but every time he approached a dog, his anxiety caused him to feel scared. And his being scared was something that the dog picked up. So the dog says, you're scared and you have your hand over me. This could be dangerous.
Mm,
So when he
yeah.
put his hand under and he wasn't scared, the dog said, oh, this could be a friend. But I think it's a really good example of how we connect with people and they react to us and we don't know why they're reacting the way they're reacting. But we have something sometimes, but the interesting part of that is to be able to look at it and say, I wonder what I'm doing. I wonder how I could do this differently. I wonder if I could have a different experience rather than, oh, I know what's going to happen. So if we can, and there's anything that has value today from what I'm saying is withhold judgment. Live in the possibility that there could be a different experience and ask yourself the question, be a better detective and allow yourself spiritually as well. If you're meditating, it isn't getting you anything, it isn't working for you. Ask yourself, is there something I could do to meditate differently? Is there a different meditation that might work for me? As opposed to, I tried that, it doesn't work.
And also, yeah, we talked about this judgmentalness because we're raised that way. We're raised with right and wrong, good and bad. Don't touch the oven, it's hot, and you have to with young children. And yet, so we grow up with that and we think we know right from wrong and we know who to judge, therefore they're wrong. And we were talking about how hard it is to release judgment because we're sure we're right and who is not like us is wrong. And yet Jesus didn't judge anybody that we know of except perhaps the leadership of the Jewish faith at the time when he challenged the money changers when he went into Jerusalem. They were they were changing money to allow people to buy animal sacrifices. And he
Well,
did.
that makes sense to me.
Yeah, all right, a little outdated,
Right.
but at any rate, he didn't judge anybody. He didn't judge people being stoned. He didn't judge the prostitutes. And if we could do that, because we're so sure we're right, especially in politics, and if we consider, well, maybe what if this person brings about some good, even if it appears bad at first, can we look for the good? Look for the good and find it. And try to allay our judgments
Mhm.
because they don't help anything. They just help us be right when we see what we think we're looking for.
Well, judgment gives us a false sense of security. It gives us a sense of ownership. I know what's right. I know how to behave. Got that handled. And as we were talking earlier about right and wrong, you're taught right and wrong at different stages of your life because it's based on your ability to grasp the concept and understand. We tell a child, don't touch the stove. We don't tell an adult, don't touch the stove. We teach an adult how to cook. But if you grow up with, no, I was taught not to touch the stove, it means you'll never be able to cook.
Right.
So what we need to be able to do is to update right and wrong with some questions about, does it still fit? Does it still make sense? But that sense of safety that goes with, I've got it all figured out, I'm safe now, is something we have to be willing to live with. What if I'm not so sure of the world? What if everything isn't as I thought it was? That's both exciting and scary, but it's not scary if you realize that you are connected to the infinite creator, that you are an infinite being, And you can't get it wrong in the larger scheme of things.
I read something that explains how in spirit souls view each other without this one is like me, that's good, this one is not, that's bad, or he or she is bad. And it was explained with the metaphor of the globe of mirrors that is used for dancing halls, that reflects the light. And they
That big
said,
ball, that's
yeah,
big
the
ball.
big ball, yes. Think of each little mirror as a soul, and that in spirit, they observe the differences. Obviously, each one is different from the other, and yet there's no judgment. They're just different. And what if we could do that, see the differences without judging it, good or bad? It's a step forward in this process of trying to not judge, because when we judge, the other person usually isn't even aware of it. Well, we make ourselves miserable by condemning their actions or behaviors. So if you want more love in your life, if you want more joy in your life, you need to think more joyous thoughts. You need to be more loving. And you need to try to eliminate that habit for yourself, because as above, so below.
Mhm.
So as you think, so is it your experience.
You know, I was thinking of even in our political system right now, where I came from was what I would like to have is somebody to be elected who would remodel. And my worst fear was that the person who was elected would come in with a bulldozer. And I'm not sure what we've got. It looks a lot like a bulldozer. But then I have to step back and say, what's happening on our coastline is a lot of the houses that were built in the 50s and the 60s that have been remodeled and remodeled and remodeled needed to be torn down so a new one could be built. The problem with tearing one down is you're tearing down all of the ideas that go with it that you think are preserved in that structure. And so what I have to be willing to do is to open my consciousness to what if we need a bulldozer some of the time and I didn't know that?
Yeah,
What if I
yeah.
don't have it all right? And by saying that, I'm not saying that I approve of or disapprove of. I'm saying I'm open to learning. I'm open to seeing how things might change in a way that at the end of the day will have a benefit for all. And so I think we have to be flexible with that. One of the things I learned, and I talked about this before, which is really fascinating to me, was the study of wolves and how they became dogs. And how they became dogs was that the wolves that were friendly towards people, eventually became the dogs that we have today. And they've lived better lives and lived longer lives and outlived wolves because of their ability to be friendly. But what they also discovered, which is really interesting, is that friendliness actually changed the gene structure or the genes in the dogs. And the final thing that they discovered was the two things that had more to do with survivability than anything else were not power and strength, but was friendliness and curiosity.
Well, now, did the friendliness change the genes, or
Yes,
did the survival of the friendly dogs and therefore pass on those genes
both.
create it? Yeah.
Eventually, what happened is the genes changed the dogs, their noses, their heads, faces changed because they weren't
Well,
going to have
yes.
to be carnivores, their tails changed.
Uh,
They actually changed to the degree that the friendliness gene was expanded.
right.
And so, but what we see, we're actually changing our own genes by being friendly versus being angry or hostile or defensive.
That's an amazing thought.
Yeah. So,
I'd like to share a
yeah.
quote by Ram Dass, because
Oh,
love
yeah.
is another way of saying, not being judgmental. So Ram Dass says, love holds the universe together. Love is the emotion of connection and merging.
Merging. Yeah.
Merging. Viewed from the soul, this world is a manifestation of love. Love is the glue, the transfer of energy between the form and the formless, matter and spirit.
I love it. And it's Ram Dass who said one of the things that I will never forget that I think about almost daily, which is we're all here just walking each
Each
other
other
home.
home.
We're not here one being superior to the other. We're here walking each other home. And
That's so
home is
beautiful.
when
In
it finally
spirit.
is all, but walking each other, which is, I mean, we're here to be together. We're here to work it out. So we're gonna wrap this part of our segment up. You wanted to share the screen?
Yes.
Okay. And here we go. And what did you want to say about that, Judith?
I wanted to say that if you would like to support this Sunday ministry and on YouTube, that there are ways that you can donate to it to keep it going, help pay for our YouTube and all the other things we pay for. And you go to this website, cslpalmbeaches.org, and in there you will see ways to donate. It's right up here at the top, second button. And so if you're interested, and even if you're not, let's say this affirmation because it is for your prosperity.
And before you say that, what I want you to know, there's a premium for sending us money. And the premium is my investment today is made with a full realization
that God is the source of my supply
and returns
it
it
to me.
enriched and multiplied. Okay, so that's the
Indeed.
premium. The premium is that you get to have more of you than maybe you imagined that you could have. Stop share.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. And so now we're going to stop